And welcome back, everybody. Today, boy, we got guests today, folks. I'm talking serious stuff here. First off, Bill Johnson, of course, running for Senate, running for the seat that's currently held by Jim Bunning.
Correct.
Welcome. And actually, Bill, you have a special guest here. Why don't you introduce him? I mean, this is big time, folks.
With me today, Dr. Alan Keyes, former ambassador under Ronald Reagan, Assistant Secretary of State, President of Alabama A&M.
Didn't know
a
that.
Man
okay.
that's loyal to our faith, our country, and to liberty.
And a man you have seen many times on television debating, run for president once or twice. You're a very well-known conservative, and I wanted to ask you: are you probably the most conservative man in America? Because and I don't mean that in a negative way. But
I know
you have your core beliefs, and you don't back down from anybody with those.
Well, I just try to be consistent. So I think that conservative to me isn't a label that means you stand here on an issue, here on an issue, here on an issue. No, it begins with a way of understanding particularly our form of government.
Okay.
And then you try to apply that as you're thinking through how we deal with different issues. And I actually think that's a requirement of statesmanship in America that's symbolized in a way by the fact that at every level of government, the people who serve take an oath to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution. And we take that for granted, but what it really means is that you're supposed to preserve the form of government as your first priority.
Right.
So that you don't do something that's going to interfere with the maintenance of government of, by, and for the people. Right? That form of government that was established when the country started. And that's really unique in history in terms of the implementation. So this is my main concern, and when I deal with issues, I'm always thinking about that first.
You know, you and I were talking before we came in here, and you said you feel like the country is maybe more in tune to the conservative value, but most people would say, you know, in this day and time, that's not the case. I mean, how do you reconcile that in your mind when that's not the general consensus? I don't think.
Well, it depends on what you mean. I think that some people would take the election result in 2008 with Obama. That's a big leftward thing, but then when you examine why people voted the way they did, it didn't have much to do with that. Really, at some point in that election cycle, a lot of people just saw it as an opportunity at the end of the day to make a statement about where America was and how we were dealing with what had been this sort of deep and painful aspect of our history and heritage. And I think that kind of helped to make the difference between what would have been a losing minority and what was a majority. Not a huge majority. I mean, it's what, 53% or something. That's not bad, but it's not something huge. And I think that's important. But when you look at the background polling, I was just talking today about it, things like the battleground poll and things like this, the consistency of conservatism in America is clear over the election cycles of the last 20 years, where people are asked to identify themselves. Mm-hmm. You have a solid group that is always there that has ranged, 33, 36, 40% conservative. You have a group that sort of identifies as liberal, that's sort of down 20, 25, not much more than that. And then the other folks, moderate and all these other labels, don't get much at all. So the solid identification across the country is conservative, and it has increased. Partly, I think, on account of the fact that we are now in the midst of dramatic issues where people are trying to pull us very hard toward what you'd call a kind of non-conservative approach, socialist, whatever, and people don't want to go. And I think that has been stirring up things at the grassroots, so that people are even more aware of their kind of conservatism, if by that you mean limited government, respect for property rights, fiscal responsibility, and an approach to other things that's based on a kind of sense of individuals having to take responsibility for themselves. Fairly clear, simple principles.
Dr. Alan Keyes, our guest. Bill Johnson's running for Senate. Now, we're going to talk to you too, Bill.
Okay, great.
We get Alan going here. He's going to talk about it. Just turn him on and we could leave for a while. That'd be good. But I tell you what, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll find out why Alan Keyes is here. He's helping Bill Johnson in his campaign. We'll find out what you guys are up to this week and some places where they can come in and say hi to you.
Sure.
We'll be right back.